I understand that Jinx being higher power can be good for the game due to the gameplay around her and stuff, but isn't Jinx being one of the best things to play incredibly offensive to ADC players? The best strategy isn't to be good at League / your champion, but to literally just play a lot of games and win through statistically getting good teammates and not do anything yourself? I think that is a very dark view and also not really accurate to what's happening here, right? Because the reality is Jinx is one of the better things to play by default, but if you want to put in the mastery to, like, if you want to put in the games to learn and master a more difficult champion, you can still outperform Jinx at high levels of mastery on other champions that are more difficult than Jinx, right? It's not to say that Jinx is always, like, by default the best thing to play, but more so to say that Jinx is a good default baseline, the baseline of the easiest 80, like one, or maybe not the easiest, but one of the easier 80 carries is powerful and is something that can be played around. I think is a more both like real and positive interpretation of that, right? I think the reality is it's not that being good at your champion or good at League is bad because, you know, Jinx is good. It's just, yeah, there is a good baseline champion that you can play that is effective, even if you don't have 300 games of Jinx played before, right? If you have 300 games of Zeri, though, she's looking pretty good. You know, depending on the patch, she might be better than Jinx at, like, you know, if you have 100 games on Zeri or whatever, right? Or she'll probably be comparable at worst, right? So it's not to say that, like, the best thing to do is, you know, play a lower skill champion. It's more to say, like, there is a high baseline that you can play, and also that Jinx has particularly sharp counterplay. She does just die when people get to her, and that is something that we do really like having in the game, of like a powerful baseline champion that can be played around by both sides very clearly. That's the positive that we're getting out of that. Speaking of Jinx, August's response to her being the number 1 ADC is the clip everyone's seen of who would rather be number 1. Do you personally have an alternative candidate for number 1 marksman, or agree Jinx's best case? I don't feel strongly that Jinx has to be number 1. I think the actual thing that I'm thinking about when I think about Jinx is, like, how much is she number 1 by, right? Because for me personally, I think that there are definitely game states where we've made Jinx number 1 by too much, right? Like, she's too much better than the other AD carries. I think it's fine if Jinx is number 1. I think Varus is also a fine number 1, right? Like, I think, like, most of the utility carries are, like, would be fine to be the most powerful AD carry. Like you think of, like, Ashe, Jhin, Varus. You can think of, like, a lot of the traditional crit marksmen. I think not Caitlyn. Caitlyn, I don't think should be number 1 because her laning phase is very oppressive. And she actually cuts it. Like, she because Caitlyn's laning phase is so powerful and she has such high synergy with certain duos that are very oppressive for lower range marksmen, she actually ends up being oppressive for a lot of the lower range champions in the game. For what it's worth, I think if Yunara was less of an agency monster, I think she would actually be a good number 1 as well, in that she's, like, she has a really distinct sharp power curve, and she's just about auto attacking and it's, like, fairly straightforward. But I think that because Yunara is 575 and she has an auto attack range advantage, and then, you know, then she turns that into, like, agency monstering people in lane, that part I think is pretty undesirable. And so, like, yeah, Varus being number 1 in solo queue means you won't ever see pro play again with his ban rate. That is true over the last, like, 5 years, but there have been times, you know, like, talking about, like, 8-9 years ago, where Varus was number 1 in solo queue and it was not a problem. Back when he was less pro skewed and the pro meta was less about utility carries, right? But yes, obviously in the current game, Varus would be a problem specifically because of his pro skew, and also because of, like, how some of his builds are more pro skewed than others, right? Is Volibear considered to be an easy champion? Are easy champions supposed to have higher win rates because Volley top is one of the lowest these days? Volibear is on the easier side as far as champions go. He's not the easiest champion in the entire game, but he's definitely on the easier side. Win rates are more complicated. It is generally true that champions that are easy should usually have higher win rates. That is not universally true, though, right? We have examples of champions like Katarina, right? Where Katarina, as an example, is a extremely difficult, highly skill skewed champion. But she also is allowed to sit at super high win rate because she is actually actively played by high mastery players. The average game of Katarina is actually by a very high mastery player. And so it makes sense for her to have higher win rate because she's very difficult. And the people that you're encountering are people who have put in the game, like put in the time and the effort to master her, on average, right? Obviously, you will sometimes encounter a Katarina that is not a high mastery player, but that is unusual, right? Most people playing Katarina are high mastery. I don't know enough about the exact situation Volibear's in right now to know, like, how often is he being played by dedicated players who have climbed the mastery curve? How often is he being played by newer players? I know that in the past, previously, his win rate was very slightly, not significantly so, but very slightly suppressed by the fact that he's a really broadly appealing champion. Like, he's very, very, very played by a lot of different people, including people who don't have a lot of mastery on him, which doesn't, like, omega suppress his win rate, but it does lower it a little bit. And so I don't know what the current state is. I don't have anything to say about that, but that's just generally what I can tell you about the whole deal. Do you think Smolder can ever be a crit late game scaler? When you think of late game crit scalers, they all have much longer range, or so being swishy is very functional to a pattern, but Smolder is the same range as MF and Jin, whose patterns are less and less functional as the game goes on. So I think it depends on what you mean by crit late game scaler. I think that as it is, Smolder is a late game scaler. He's become a little bit less of a, some of the builds that have changed, right? I don't know exactly what his current build is on live right now, like what the optimal build is, like literally like current moment. But the like fightery builds don't scale as well as the crit builds. They're much better mid game. But the more we index him into crit scaling, generally speaking, the better he scales. But the way that he scales is not the same as like a Jinx, right? Where Jinx is going to auto attack 5 people on the enemy team to death if you do not kill her first, right? She is inevitable and she does a lot of DPS, right? Smolder's crit scaling is a caster scaling, right? He scales in the same way that like good scaling mages scale, like a Victor, for example, right? He's basically an AD mage even when he's crit, well, I guess especially when he's crit, where he's very squishy, he deals very, very, very high damage. He's not quite as inevitable as Jinx, but he does very, very, very powerful caster outputs. And we've seen versions of Smolder that have powerful crit scaling, like Smolder from last year, for example. Like, if you look at Smolder for like most of last year, it was more popular to go Essence Reaver Shojin, but it was actually higher win rate, partially because you would generally do it when you were ahead, to go Essence Reaver Infinity Edge and build full crit, and you would do massive damage. Again, I'm not speaking to the specific current state of Smolder. I'm not super up to date on that. I just haven't played Smolder recently, and I haven't been seeing him in my games. But ultimately, I think Smolder can be a crit champion who scales, and I think crit, in fact, is good for his scaling, and he has been a crit scaling champion before. He will not be like Jinx, and that's okay, right? And I do not think he should be like Jinx. He is not as inevitable as Jinx. He does not have the level of DPS that Jinx has, but he does have powerful scaling. It is just scaling more like a mage than an AD carry because he is a caster, right?